John Dickens presents A Dennis Carol, a Monster Jam Christmas story. Chapter 1. The Disdain of Dennis. The winter air was crisp and filled with the distant roar of engines, but inside the sprawling garage of Dennis Anderson, the legendary Monster Jam driver, the mood was far from festive. Dennis, known for his unmatched skills in the driver's seat of Gravedigger, was also infamous for his disdain for Christmas. The colorful lights and cheerful decorations that adorned the streets and homes of his colleagues and fans never found a place in his heart or his home. His garage, usually bustling with the sounds of revving engines and clanking tools, was quieter as the holiday season approached. His team, used to his grumpy demeanor, often exchanged knowing glances but dared not question his aversion to the season's joy. Among them was Pablo Huffaker, a dedicated mechanic and driver in his own right, who had worked with Dennis for years. Pablo was the antithesis of Dennis when it came to Christmas. His workspace modestly decorated with a small, tinsel-laden tree and pictures of his family, including his young son, little Pablito, who was battling an illness. Pablo's love for his son was evident in every conversation, often sharing updates on Pablito's health with his colleagues, who offered words of support and hope. On this particular day, as the snow gently blanketed the world outside, Dennis grumbled about the upcoming Christmas-themed Monster Jam show.
"It's all just a commercial ruse,"
he muttered under his breath, dismissing the holiday as nothing more than a distraction from the real work at hand. As the day wore on, Dennis overheard his team discussing their holiday plans. Their excitement and anticipation for family gatherings, gift exchanges, and festive feasts were in stark contrast to his own feelings. He couldn't help but scoff at their enthusiasm, deepening the divide between him and the rest of his crew. Pablo, sensing the growing tension, approached Dennis with some hesitation.
"Mr. Anderson, I was hoping if I could leave a little bit early today. I want to pick up a special gift for little Pablito. It's his first Christmas since his diagnosis, and we want to make it a special one,"
Pablo said, his voice filled with a mix of hope and worry. Dennis barely looked up from his work, his response curt and devoid of empathy.
"Do what you must, Huffaker, but remember we have a show to prepare for. I expect everything to be in top shape, no matter what your personal plans are."
His words were cold, mirroring the frost that was forming on the garage windows. As Pablo left, a sense of guilt momentarily washed over Dennis, but it was quickly replaced with irritation. He had no time for sentimentality or distractions. There was work to be done, and Christmas, with all of its frivolity and cheer, was just another hurdle to overcome in his pursuit of perfection on the track. Chapter 2. The Visit of Lyle Hancock. The night was cold and still in the garage, with only the faintest echoes of distant Monster Jam cheers penetrating its walls. Dennis Anderson sat alone, poring over plans and schematics for the next show. His mind was a whirlwind of engines, stunts, and strategies, with no room for the holiday cheer that was sweeping through the rest of the world. As the clock struck midnight, a strange, eerie sound began to fill the garage. It was unlike anything Dennis had heard before, a cacophony of metal grinding and engines sputtering. He looked up, his eyes narrowing, trying to discern the source of the noise in the dim light. Suddenly, the ghostly figure of Lyle Hancock, a former Gravedigger driver and Dennis's old colleague, appeared before him. Lyle had left Monster Jam years ago and last drove Blue Thunder in 2003. Now he stood in front of Dennis, his appearance ghastly and forlorn, bound in the heavy shocks and worn parts of Gravedigger number 3. Dennis gasped, with his usual bravado faltering at this spectral sight.
"Lyle, is that you? What in the world?"
he stammered, disbelief etched on his face. The ghost of Lyle Hancock spoke in a voice that was both haunting and pained. "Dennis, I come as a warning. In life, I was consumed by my passion for driving and winning, much like you. But I ignored the joy and spirit of those around me, especially during Christmas." The chains of Gravedigger number 3 clanked and groaned as Lyle moved, each sound a reminder of the weight of his past actions. "These chains I bear are the burdens of a life lived without care for others. Without embracing the true spirit of this season, I am bound to them, as you will be if you do not change your ways." Dennis, still reeling from shock, found his voice.
"Change my ways? But I'm a champion, a legend in Monster Jam. What need have I for change?"
Lyle's ghostly face softened with sadness. Dennis, the trophies and accolades mean nothing if you lose yourself and those who care for you along the way. Tonight, you will be visited by 3 spirits. Heed their lessons well, for they're your only chance to avoid a fate like mine. As the apparition of Lyle began to fade, the garage seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper. Dennis was left alone once more, but the echo of Lyle's warning rang in his ears, unsettling him more than he cared to admit. He tried to dismiss the encounter as a figment of his overworked mind, but the image of Lyle, bound in the remnants of Gravedigger number 3, haunted him. Dennis was not a man easily scared, but the thought of being visited by 3 more spirits filled him with a dread he hadn't felt since his earliest days of racing. Chapter 3: Gravedigger's Past. Dennis, now restless and uneasy, tried to focus on his work, but the ghostly visit in Lyle Hancock's haunting message lingered in his mind. The clock ticked loudly in the silent garage, marking the passage of time towards the inevitable arrival of the first spirit. As the clock struck 1, a shimmering light appeared, coalescing into the form of a 1950 Ford grain truck, painted in a striking blue and silver scheme. This was no ordinary truck. It was the legendary first iteration of Gravedigger, known as Gravedigger the Legend. The ghostly truck spoke in a deep, reverberating voice. "Dennis Anderson, I am the ghost of Gravedigger the Legend, here to show you your past." Dennis, still in disbelief, watched as the garage around him faded away, replaced by the vibrant atmosphere of the Metrodome. They were at a Monster Jam show, one that Dennis remembered well. The crowd was massive, their cheers deafening as they awaited the highlight of the night. His performance, Dennis watched, a younger version of himself, full of vigor and passion, revving the engine of the real Gravedigger. The ghostly truck beside him spoke. "Observe, Dennis. This was a time when your heart was full of more than just the desire to win. You loved the sport, the fans, the thrill of the performance." On the track, Dennis watched his past self execute a breathtaking jump over 2 school buses, the crowd erupting in cheers. The truck teetered on the edge of rolling over not once, but twice, but he skillfully righted it each time, the audience going wild with excitement. The ghost of Gravedigger the Legend continued. "Look at their faces, Dennis. See the joy and excitement you brought to them. Remember the feeling of bringing happiness to others, not just the thrill of victory." As Dennis watched, he felt a surge of emotions he hadn't experienced in years. The exhilaration, the connection with the audience, the sheer love of the sport. It was all there in that memory. The scene began to fade. The ghost of Gravedigger the Legend said, "The past holds many lessons, Dennis. What you were, what you loved, and what you brought joy. Do not lose the sight of these as you forge your path forward." As the garage returned to its old quiet state, Dennis stood there, a mix of nostalgia and confusion swirling within him.
I miss it, but everything's changed. I have to be more competitive.
The memory was a stark contrast to his current life, a reminder of a time when Christmas and Monster Jam were about more than just competition and personal glory.
A Dennis Carol by John Dickens is funded in part from viewers like you.
Chapter 4: Gravedigger's Present. Dennis, still grappling with the emotions stirred by the ghost of Gravedigger the Legend, didn't have long to dwell on his thoughts. As the clock struck 2, a new apparition materialized before him. It was a 1950 Chevy panel van, the iconic Gravedigger, painted black with green flames. Its presence both awe-inspiring and ominous.
"I am the ghost of Gravedigger,"
the spirit announced, its voice echoing around the now shadowy garage.
"I am here to show you the present, the reality of your actions and their impact on those around you."
Dennis asked.
What more is there for me to be shown? I have the greatest monster truck team in the world.
The spectre responded.
"Look, Dennis, at your very surroundings."
They were in the current Gravedigger's garage, but it was eerily quiet and still. The truck sat idle, its usual roaring life silenced. The spirit's voice echoed around them.
"Behold your domain, Dennis. Observe the emptiness that now pervades it."
Dennis looked and saw the garage as if for the first time. The tools were neatly arranged, the truck stood pristine, but the space felt hollow, devoid of the passion and camaraderie that once filled it.
This emptiness is not just in space, but in spirit.
The ghost continued.
A garage that was once a hub of teamwork and enthusiasm now mirrors the void in your own heart. A void where the joy of Monster Jam and the warmth of Christmas should reside.
The scene shifted again, and Dennis found himself outside a modest house. He recognized it immediately as Pablo Huffaker's home. The ghost of Gravedigger motioned for him to look through the window. Inside, Pablo sat at a dinner table with his wife Tina and their son Pablito. The small family was eating a simple meal. Their conversation was heavy with emotion. Dennis watched, unseen, as Pablo spoke about Monster Jam.
"It's not the same anymore,"
Pablo said, a hint of sadness in his voice.
"The excitement, the passion, it feels like it's missing. Even Dennis, he's changed. Monster Jam has become more about winning at any cost, losing the joy it once brought to us and the fans."
Tina nodded in agreement, her eyes filled with worry.
"It's not just the shows. It's like the whole team has lost its heart. Dennis used to be so different, so full of life. Now, it's like he's just going through the motions."
Little Pablito, listening intently, chimed in.
Will it ever be fun again, Daddy? Will Mr. Anderson smile again like in the old pictures?
His innocent question hung in the air, amplifying the sense of loss and longing in the room. Dennis felt a tightness in his chest as he watched this scene unfold. The words of Pablo and his family cut deep, revealing a truth he had refused to acknowledge. His pursuit of victory had blinded him to the needs and feelings of those around him, including his own team. As they returned to the quiet of his garage, the ghost of Gravedigger spoke softly.
The present is a reflection of your choices, Dennis. Your actions have consequences, not just for you, but for those who look up to you, who believe in you. Remember, the heart of Monster Jam is its people, not just its machines.
The spirit faded away, leaving Dennis alone with his thoughts now filled with the realization of the joy and camaraderie he had lost along the way.
"I trust Pablo like a brother. He's always been the first person I call when I need help. Could I really have become so blinded?"
Chapter 5. Gravedigger's Future. Dennis, now deeply unsettled by the revelations of the first two spirits, braced himself for the final ghostly visitation. As the clock tolled 3, a chilling presence filled the garage. The apparition of a 1950 Willys panel Jeep appeared. This was the ghost of Son of a Digger, a silent and ominous figure emanating the eerie, unfinished intro of Hell's Bells by AC/DC, the guitar riff never kicking in, only the repetitive ringing of the bell. Dennis understood this immediately.
"I understand your intentions, Spirit. You represent Monster Jam shows yet to come, but because the scores haven't been turned in yet, you're not allowed to speak."
The ghost, a spectral representation of the future, gestured for Dennis to follow. He hesitantly did so, finding himself in a different location. An empty trailer outside of a stadium, housing a stripped green monster truck frame, devoid of all components. The sight was haunting, the skeleton of what was once a mighty machine. Confused, Dennis asked,
"Whose truck is this? Why is it abandoned like this?"
But the ghost offered no answer, only continuing to emit the haunting tune. Abruptly, the scene shifted. They were outside Pablo Huffaker's home once again. This time, the atmosphere was different. Dennis peered in to see Pablo and his family in a future he hardly recognized. Pablo was talking animatedly about his new role with Team Max D, a departure that seemed unthinkable to Dennis.
"Leaving Gravedigger was the best decision I ever made,"
Pablo said with a sense of relief. Tina added,
"And with Pablito cured, thanks to the doctors at Monster Jam University, we finally have a fresh start."
The conversation took a turn as they spoke of Dennis.
"I just couldn't work with him anymore,"
Pablo said.
"He lost his way, lost what made him great. It's sad, really."
The words stung Dennis, feeling like a betrayal from someone who had considered not just an employee, but a friend. Overwhelmed, Dennis turned to the ghost.
"Whose truck was that? Why, show me this."
The silent spirit transported him back to the trailer. There, in the dim light, Dennis saw an inscription on the tube-frame chassis. Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina, D. Anderson. His truck. his legacy reduced to a hollow shell. Realizing the gravity of his future, Dennis pleaded with the ghost.
Spirit, hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Assure me that I may yet change these shadows you have shown me, mine altered life.
Suddenly the trailer around the frame began to change. It started to age rapidly, the walls corroding, the floor buckling, paint peeling off in large curling strips. The air grew thick with the scent of rust and decay. Then, without warning, flames began to lick the edges of the trailer. Small at first, they quickly grew into a roaring inferno, consuming what was left of the gravedigger truck. The heat was intense, the light blinding, as the fire ravaged the last remnants of what Dennis had built. Dennis stepped back, his face a mask of horror and disbelief.
No!
He cried out, his voice echoing in the fiery maelstrom, its presence a solemn reminder of the inevitability of this future. Dennis's plea grew more fervent.
Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this metal.
But the ghost offered no reprieve. Its silent, haunting melody of hell's bells, a stark backdrop to the destruction before them. The trailer, along with the remains of Gravedigger, was consumed entirely, leaving nothing but ashes and the echo of a future that Dennis was desperate to rewrite. Chapter 6: Christmas Day. Dennis awoke with a start, finding himself in the familiar seat of his beloved Gravedigger truck. His heart raced as he realized it was still Christmas Day. He had been given the second chance. The weight of the night's revelations hung heavily on him, but so did a newfound sense of hope and purpose. Bursting with a newfound vigor, Dennis raced out of his garage, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The crisp morning Christmas air filled his lungs, rejuvenating him with every breath. He felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders, a weight he hadn't realized he had been carrying. The streets, adorned with festive decorations and bustling with holiday cheer, seemed to welcome him into a world he had long shunned. He greeted everyone he met.
Merry Christmas, Bari. Merry Christmas, Bakugan.
His first stop was at a quaint local shop known for its home-blended essential oils. Dennis had heard of their reputed healing powers, and, though he had been skeptical in the past, now held a hopeful belief in their potential, imagining how they might bring comfort and healing to little Pablito. Dennis then stopped at a second shop, where he purchased a brand new ISP seat. Not for himself, he always preferred the old-school butler seats, but for Pablo and his family. With his gifts in tow, Dennis headed to Pablo's house. The look of surprise and joy on Pablo's face when he saw Dennis at the door, arms laden with gifts, was priceless.
Merry Christmas, Pablo. I have something special for you and your family,
Dennis warmly exclaimed. Pablo was speechless as he accepted the new ISP seat and the essential oils.
Dennis, I don't know what to say. This is too much,
he stammered, visibly moved by the gesture. Dennis smiled, a true, heartfelt smile.
That's not all, Pablo. When you come to work today, there's a pay raise waiting for you. And this.
He handed Pablo a new Gravedigger souvenir cotton candy mug, a symbol of the fun and spirit of Monster Jam. Pablo, overwhelmed by the kindness, could only hug Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis. This means more than you know,
he said, his voice choked with emotion. As Dennis returned to the garage, he felt a change not just in himself, but in the air around him. The team noticed it too. There was a new energy, a renewed spirit. The joy of Monster Jam was reigniting, starting from its very heart. Dennis Anderson. The story of Dennis's transformation spread throughout the monster truck community. Fans, drivers, and crew members alike were touched by his change of heart, including his biggest fan, little Pablito. The spirit of Monster Jam, long dimmed, shone brightly once more, fueled by camaraderie, passion, and a shared love for the sport. In the years that followed, Dennis's legend grew not just for his prowess on the track, but for his generosity and spirit of it. Every nut and bolt on his truck, every shingle on his roof, was supported by the fans and the Monster Jam community, who had come to see him not just as a great driver, but as a great man. Monster Jam had regained its heart, and it beat stronger than ever, thanks to Dennis Anderson. I'd like to thank everybody who stayed till the end. I had a lot of fun making this with the help of OpenAI's ChatGPT and image generators.
And hopefully everybody who watched this got a new appreciation of both Monster Jam and of Christmas. Gave me a good opportunity to do an impression of Dennis, too. Always a lot of fun. So, until next time, have a Happy New Year.